Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Earthworm Slumber Party.
Yay! Where we are exploring big ideas playfully.
Oh, I am so excited for this. My name is Nisha Modi. I'm a feminist healing and life coach and speaker, and I'm also an avocado whisperer. So, holler if you need some help with that.
Yum. Okay, well, my name is Opulence. I'm also so excited. Excuse me, my name is Opulence Abundance, and I am just a luxurious creature. I'm also a speaker, a healing professional, and a conflict navigator.
Beautiful, beautiful. So this is Earthworm Slumber Party, but why are we doing this podcast together, Opulence?
Okay, there's a few reasons why you and I have come together to bring another podcast into the world because not enough podcasts in the world.
There really aren't. I agree.
Really not. The reasons that are clear to me is our work overlaps, but we do work around boundaries and healing and communication, but from different angles. So us getting together to create new boundary technology feels very powerful to me. We're both South Asian. And for me, building more spaces where South Asians are connecting is really important. The reason it's so important to me is that as South Asians in America, there can be a loss of awareness of politics and power dynamics like caste oppression. And also sometimes it pushes us into spaces or into groups with other people of color, specifically with Black folks. So a big part of what motivates me to connect with other South Asians and create spaces for South Asians having conversations is realizing that I need a reference point of what it's like to do work with my own people. Because as South Asians, sometimes we light up ancestral dynamics in each other. And then the final reason is that we are both earth signs. And this is an earthworm slumber party. Why do you think we're doing, or why is it powerful that we're doing this podcast together, Nisha?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I loved what you said, Opulence. Especially about kind of what I heard is just what we bring alive in each other ancestrally. That sounds so magical. That just sounds so magical to me. And when I met you, we were in a coaching program together. And when I met you and we first talked, I was just like, wow, I just feel like I know this person. And then also, finding out that you were Desi South Asian was just super exciting because I think it's so important to make these connections within my lineage with people, like you said, who our work overlaps because, growing up, the whole model minority myth with South Asians and Asians in general really pits us against each other sometimes. And I loved every time I talked to you, I was like, we should record this conversation. It was so good. And eventually, actually, what ended up happening was, so I've had a podcast before. It was called Migrations. It's where I interviewed different creative and political Asians about their stories or about a specific topic that came to mind. And I really liked it. But it honestly was just too much work for myself. And I just found myself kind of being burnt out by it, even though I loved it, even though I felt like it did pretty well. And my friend Dalya, who is the producer of this podcast, approached me saying, why don't you do another podcast? Oh, we lost Opulence's face, but that's okay. We'll keep going. She approached me asking if I want to do a podcast. And I was like, no, it's just too much work. It's not what I want to focus on right now. But then I was like, you know what? Maybe I want to do one if I could do it with someone. And then the first person that I really thought of was Opulence, just because of what I just said. We had this great chemistry together whenever we spoke. And I felt like any conversation we had could be recorded. So that's why we're here. That's why we're doing Earthworm Slumber Party. And I love the Earth sign connection. That was so beautiful. I'm a Virgo. That makes us little earthworms.
Oh my gosh, Nisha, you said so many beautiful things in there. But I really feel what you're saying about us coming together is really resisting those narratives around competition and how powerful and healing that is. And it actually woke up these memories of me of like, I remember when we were first meeting, I remember seeing some of the overlaps in our work and like feeling that anxiety, but then being so excited that we were building together. So grateful to be invited on your podcast and to share the story of my name. And also shout out Dalya. So excited Dalya is with us. So Nisha, I have to know, this isn't just a normal South Asian slumber party, okay? This is an earthworm slumber party. And I need to know, why earthworms?
Why earthworms? I also love, for anyone who's watching this, how I'm doing this little jig. And I guess that's how earthworms move in my head. Maybe the jig's like because I don't think earthworms don't have feet, right? So they're just kind of like going along. Yeah, maybe that's it. Like we're going along. We are composting. We are with the earth, grounding ourselves, making space for growth, And I think that's a nod to what we both of the work that we both do that overlap. We make space for healing, we make space for growth, we make space for interdependence in the world. And it's playful. And the tagline of this is exploring big ideas playfully. So we're taking these big ideas and being playful with this Earthworm Slumber Party theme. And for those of you that don't know, my name is Nisha, like I said, and Nisha actually in Sanskrit means night. So I loved the slumber party theme because it just reminded me of that night joy of a slumber party that I can recall as a child. And that I feel like anytime anyone hears slumber party, it equals fun. So adding earthworm to that even makes it more fun.
I love that, Nisha. Thank you for sharing. I know that for myself, I really identify with the earthworm theme because earthworms take in soil. They eat soil, and through their digestion, or even like they'll eat leaves and things, and they break it down. And through that act, they transform it into something that's extremely nutrient dense. And I've always related to that because I'm always someone that will process things emotionally and turn it over and look at anything that happens from all sides. And the reason I do that is that I find I'm able to grow from things that way. I'm able to refine and get this these really juicy wisdom. So from just moving things through and processing them. And I just think about how this whole world, the computers we're talking on, all of this is like computers, for instance, it's coming from humans. And humans need food. And in order for food to grow, we need healthy soil. And the key to healthy soil, one of the guardians of the soil is the earthworm. Without the earthworm, we probably wouldn't have the same quality of nutritious food. So to me, it all just goes back to the earthworm. And I wanted to call them in as we took on this pretty big task to explore big ideas playfully. And so I kind of want to zero in on that. That's the theme of this podcast. That's our tagline. That's what we say we're going to do. I want to know what draws you to that and how are you qualified to do that?
Ooh. Okay, this is juicy. I think what draws me to that is I see myself as someone who's very serious, but also has a really cutesy side. I think that's actually evidenced by my tattoos. If anyone could see, I have this really beautiful lotus star, almost very uterus actually looking tattoo. And then I have this really freaking cute kitty tattoo that's in a taiyaki. And I feel like this actually represents who I am, a very serious, I think about beauty and things that are ornate and grounded. I'm really going back to that earthworm. And then I also think of things that are just so friggin' cute, like being an avocado whisperer, like Lisa Frank, like Care Bears. And so I really like talking about, any concept in a way that also has a levity to it, because I think there's such a seriousness to life. And I also think it's something that we have to laugh at. And I think exploring big ideas playfully is just another reflection of how I like to see life, how I like to see the earth, how I like to see relationships is something that could be so deep yet so playful. And I think so often in this world, we forget to play. We lose our inner child, is just kind of squashed in the seriousness of a 9 to 5 and paying the bills and paying taxes and all this stuff that we forget to play. And I know myself that that's one of my wounds from being a child is that I didn't feel like I had enough spaciousness to play. I felt like, part of my mother wound is feeling like I always had to work. And my mom said, like, you always have to work. I work, you got to work hard. You're being lazy. And so that really wounded me in terms of what play could even be. And sometimes when I start to play now, I get so joyous, but I also like hold myself back thinking like, can I do this? So exploring big ideas playfully, I think is a way to also continue that healing for me, to know that we could talk about really serious, important things in a playful way.
Wow. Thank you for sharing, Nisha. So much of what I hear you reflecting, it definitely makes me think about like how it's bringing up this story for me where like when I was younger, I broke my leg and I learned that in my bone there was a pocket of air and my leg was going to break no matter what because it had a hole in it. I was just born with this birth defect. When my leg broke, the pocket of air was discovered. Nobody knew about it before then. And the doctors were like, okay, we're going to have to inject steel into your bone so it'll be strong and it won't break again. Or there were all these ideas of what they were going to need to do to support my bone. But what ended up happening was the bone breaking caused my bone to regrow and to fill the hole on its own. And I just take it away as like the way you're talking about play. Like sometimes we have a traumatized relationship to something or a trauma, and it's actually that broken relationship that pushes us to consciously heal and strengthen that muscle. All that to say, you sound really qualified to be playful. I just like see that it's a skill you've cultivated, and I really love that. I mean, I think similarly, I really resonated with the parts where you were talking about like how you're able to be serious, but then bring something playful into that. How I relate to that is that like, I'm someone where people have told me that I radiate out a lot of joy, and that's so genuine. And I feel like I can be authentically and genuinely joyful because I'm also really sad. And there's no part of me that's in denial about my sadness. I feel that grief. Sometimes I feel it less than other times, but I have a lot of sadness and anger that I used to hold and I used to let it lead me. And now I kind of understand that like those emotions are really sacred and they're really deep, and I can let them ground me and fuel me. And who I choose to share them with is really important. It's not for me to share with the whole world. So I think like just being grounded into those two things has kind of led me in my journey as being like a healing professional. And shout out to Carol from Project for Torture Victims, one of my mentors that I had the joy of working with. Carol is someone that holds space, like one-on-one space with people who have very severe trauma or are refugees and have been tortured by governments. She also like volunteers with the city of LA to be like an emotional mental health first responder. And she's able to do that work with such ease and grace. I really admire her for that. And when I met her, I was like, I want to hold space like that. And simultaneously, she's someone with like the silliest water bottle. And she's always laughing and she's always making silly jokes. And it kind of taught me, to your point, that like we can hold heavy things, but we need to harness that magic of laughter and joy. And actually embracing both allows us to fully embody both and go deeper into both.
Wow. Everything you just said was so rich. I love learning about this person, this mentor of yours. That's so beautiful. What a great story. And when you were talking about your feelings and holding them, it actually reminded me of what you were saying with the earthworm, like eating the soil and allowing it to go through to compost. And I think if we do that with our feelings and the things that we're actually kind of not allowing our bodies to process, when we allow that to process, we do heal. And so I love that parallel right there. When you said that, it made me think about what you had mentioned with the earthworm. And yeah, I just love the story you shared about your friend. And, that's what this podcast is about. It's about sharing these stories, getting to know each other, and then exploring the big ideas around them and how we resonate with them. And for you listeners out there, see how it resonates with you as well. What shows up. So I'm curious, Opulence, what are the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves?
I love this question. And I can definitely speak to the stories I tell about myself. And I love what you're kind of asking around, like, what is our collective story too? What's coming up for me that's just obvious, clear, true is like, we are humans. And I think the deeper story that I've come to embrace is that, like, we are a part of nature. I think like stories more specific that I tell about myself. And I think the stories we tell really matter. They really, really matter, because it's like the stories we tell, the stories we write, the stories we take in, they inform how we move through the world and how we see ourselves. So there was a time in my life when I was growing up where my story was like, I'm an outcast. I don't belong. I'm never going to be happy. And now the story I tell about myself is like, I'm an ancient being. I am like a very beautiful person. And I'm also bigger than this lifetime in this world, which sounds a little grandiose, but I think just for me to hold the fullness of who I am is really important to me. And I think the other story I tell about myself is that, like, I am someone who is here to just embody my authentic self. And just to be and to show up for people and to really just like be present. And that story brings me so much peace, because whenever I'm like, I'm not doing enough, I just remember, like, I'm not actually here to do. My story is that I'm here to be and receive and experience. Thank you for asking me that beautiful question, Nisha. I want to know, what are the stories that you think we're telling ourselves?
Yeah. I really do like that we're answering this question, because one thing I've been thinking a lot about lately is our emotions and the thoughts we have about our emotions, and how that is actually often what we can get lost in. Lost in or found in, I guess, too, right? Because that informs our beliefs about ourselves, right? Sometimes we just think, okay, I'm sad, that's bad, as opposed to, I'm sad, so my thought about it, I could say it's bad, or I can say, oh, I need to sit with this. Like, what is this trying to tell me? And then that informs my belief, like, as like I'm a bad person, or I shouldn't be sad, versus, oh, like emotions are really hard, like are really helpful to like allow ourselves to move through our body, or I should share my sadness with someone so that I can get the support I need. So these are stories, these emotional stories we tell ourselves on a very basic level, on an everyday basis. I mean, we move through so many emotions every day, right? And this influences how we see ourselves, and it also influences how we interact and care for others. One thing that you were saying earlier about like telling stories, is I was thinking how we actually share stories with others is a form of care. And maybe a form of not caring too. I don't know. It depends on the context. And I think these, sharing these stories is a way that we share our energy with the world, our emotional energy, our spiritual energies. And I think that that's so important to think about in terms of the stories we tell ourselves, and the stories we end up telling each other as a result. And so when I talk about like doing inner work, I'm always talking about collective care. I'm always talking about, the community and society, and how the stories we tell ourselves impact others, whether we want them to or not, right? So yeah, that's really what right now is coming to my mind for, the stories that we tell ourselves.
Wow, thank you for taking us there. Just listening to you really opened up there's a lot of possibilities in my brain around impact, how we share, what stories we tell about ourselves, and how we end up repeating those stories out to other people. I'm excited just to reflect more on that. I want to know, as we're talking about our relationship between self, others, what do you know about how other people perceive you?
Whew, that's such a good question. It's actually a question as a coach that I ask people to tell me 3 adjectives others used to describe them and 3 adjectives they used to describe themselves. And I feel like people would describe me as funny, warm, and wise. I think if I were to answer that question myself, it's funny, I ask others to tell me, but it's not something that recently I've thought about a lot. I think that wisdom and that playfulness definitely go together. Delight is my word of the year. And I think people see a lot of delight in me in terms of my joy. And I personally see delight as like joy with play. It's a little playful joy, is delight. So yeah, it almost feels like a giggle. Like I hear like a giggling, like delightful laugh. That's how that I feel that I am perceived. I think, I don't know. Then I also think about the stuff like, identity wise, like I'm South Asian. I am upper caste. I am divorced. My father passed away. Maybe people feel sorry for me, for any of those reasons or none of those reasons. I don't know. So there's the like, in South Asian culture, it's like, what will people say? Log kya kahenge? Like, right? So what will people say about me? What do they say about me? I don't know. But I guess all of those together, combined separately on some level, I think people perceive me as. But I really love this question, not as a way to judge myself, but as a way to, I don't know, explore relationship, right? Yeah. I love to
Absolutely.
hear about that from you, but I'm curious what you think about what I said.
Yes, I want to start. I'm like, don't rush us because I got to respond to that for sure.
I love it.
I think it's, as you were sharing more of your like, well, one, I was giggling because you sound like such a just charming little fountain, like just bubbling out with delight. I love it. But then I think when you were sharing more of other things that people might perceive about you, I was really reflecting on the relationship just in its most basic way, because we're both healing professionals. We're talking to people about emotion and feeling. Vulnerability and shame are obviously central to all of that. But as you connect it to like, what will people say and judgment, it just really brought me back to the fact that when we share about ourselves, even as if we share just a little piece of information, it does open us up to that judgment or other people seeing us. And yeah, I was just reflecting on that this question about what do you know about how other people perceive you? It's a question about self-knowing. And it's also like, well, who's perceiving me? And who have I been taught? Whose voices live in my head of who might be perceiving me,
Totally. Wow. Yeah, I like that intermix with self-knowing. Yeah, so much to think about there. I'm going to really be thinking about what you just said because I think it also just goes to like when we think about it, like how much do I care, or what do I care about for this question, because the first thing I was like, oh, like people see me as like warm and funny. Like I just I love actually what you said was like what the bubbling fountain, the happy little fountain. I think that's good. That's how people perceive me. I love that. We'll go with that. I totally, yeah, that's it. I'll just ignore everything else I said. I just want to leave with that.
I love that. I also have to say that when I first met you and, like I signed up for your email list and you shared, I think in like one of the first emails I read about your divorce, I think it definitely drew me into you in this way where I was like, oh, I feel there's like a resonance in there where I'm like, wow, this person has gone through something. So I just want to put that out there. I'm glad you shared the other things, that you let yourself be perceived as more than just a bubbly fountain. But when I think about this question for myself, I really relate to what you're saying because I think like I've gotten the feedback, and I'll be honest, it's not an accident that people perceive me as a joyful person. I do a lot of like self-care and like purposely kind of try and think about like how am I showing up in the world? And I really try and show up with just a grounded, loving presence. I love Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Vietnamese monk. And one of the things he says, he talks about these Vietnamese refugees on boats and how the boat is at risk of capsizing during a storm or pirates may attack the boat. And he talks about the value of like, when that happens, everyone wants to help. But if you can just be a calm person on the boat, that is the biggest gift you can offer. And when I think about our current world and how like it feels like we're on a boat in a metaphorical ocean and it's like, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know if we're going to capsize. But when I just remember like I can show up, I can like be a helpful presence just by cultivating calm and groundedness and like loving presence. I really like that task for myself. So I like to think that that's how people see me. And sometimes I take like, I'm a fiber artist. So sometimes I'm like knitting in a corner and I just think I'm bringing like calm, loving grandma energy. But the reality of my life, this is a podcast, so not everyone can see me. But the reality of my life is that I grew up in South Carolina. And I grew up as an intersex person, and I didn't actually have the language to know what was going on with my body until I was maybe 18 or 19. So it was much later in life, but I was aware that my body did not look like the people around me, that I had bodily traits of both genders. And it unfortunately made me a target of aggression, sometimes from my classmates. Like I definitely got bullied. But I think also sometimes I would feel the discomfort from the adults I was around. And this is an experience I've shared about because to be a child and to realize that I'm unsettling, and I didn't have any of this language at the time, but now I can look back and say, oh, that person, my friend's mom was really triggered and uncomfortable by me. And I felt it in a certain type of way, and I didn't really know how to react. Those experiences played out early on. And what I learned at a certain point was just that like, oh, by cultivating this really loving energy around me, it doesn't mean that everyone will perceive me as like a beacon of joy and love, but it does mean I have a little more control over the energy versus if I'm just ungrounded, not caring for my energy, taking in everything people are feeling, getting pulled into fear. And if you're ever with me in public and someone approaches me or I get harassed, you'll see me really like the facilitator come out. Because sometimes even if people approach me casually, my guard will go up and something turns on in me and I'm like very aware of the exits. I'm like guiding the conversation to go in a safe way. And so there's this part of me that's just very conscious of how other people perceive me. So I think some people perceive me as a person of color. People who know me know that I'm South Asian, also upper caste. I know that people who know me know that I am the child of two people who own a mattress store, basically a sleep princess, okay? And I think that people who know me can perceive that I'm like, have just like a lot of, I like want to be seen. I have this like shining energy of a performer. And I'm also aware that some people who perceive me are just like overwhelmed and probably have never seen someone like me that embodies such different energies of gender together. And I think I just like blow their minds, probably because they're really similar to me and are feeling triggered around it. That went in an interesting direction, not to call those people out, but.
Oh, I loved all of it. And one thing that struck out was when you were talking about like if there's like a tense situation, that facilitator comes out, and it's because you're able to or like being able to have that joy that around you. It made me think of like a bubble, like a boundary bubble. And then it reminded me of what you said earlier about boundary technology, and how, to me, that sounds very much like what you employ with your joy. Like this boundary technology, it's like a suit. I'm thinking about like an animation where you just like have that suit on, and it's not like a porous suit, and it's a very loving suit, and it's able to be that facilitator and to be that joy. And yeah, you don't know how others are going to perceive you, but you're able to kind of hold that for yourself. And I really just loved visualizing that and hearing about it. Because when you said boundary technology earlier, I thought it was so juicy, and I really loved it. Thinking about the ways that we create this technology, the ways we use this technology, the ways people can abuse this technology as well, So yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that. It was so beautiful hearing about your experience, especially from that embodied perspective, right? Thinking about the earthworm and what it does with this body, and you coming to the point when you were 18, learning about this. That's your whole childhood, And I imagine that, I'm not going to speak for you, but I imagine that that's very difficult. And maybe it also gave you a name or something for it, So yeah, so that perception, I think perception of ourselves generally can like really evolve based on also how we're getting to know ourselves too.
Thank you for that reflection, Nisha. And I feel really seen in that reflection, partially because people see me as this gender bender, living my authentic self, and just doing that in so many spaces. Like I live in South Carolina now, and I'm like, I'm not going to change who I am or how I dress for anyone. This is just who I am. So I think people don't realize that when I was 18 and I started being exposed to these ideas that gender is a social construct from like my education, and then I was also going through this experience of receiving a diagnosis and understanding my body more clearly, it was actually deeply destabilizing to me. And I think if I didn't have the type of body that I have, I don't know if I would be a part of the trans community. And I think it's so interesting because I love being a part of the trans community. A lot of my peers know who they are in their spirit, in their mind, in their body, in their heart. Like they have this deep inner knowing, and they will guide their body there. And I just had a different experience of my body, knew who I was, and I had to like learn to open to that truth and actually shift my perspective about the world. And hopefully that's a story I'll go deeper into in a podcast.
Yeah.
But one of the things I wanted to name about earthworms is that I learned in high school, and I felt, before I even knew what I was, I felt such companionship with earthworms because I used to watch Isabella Rossellini's like YouTube shorts where she would dress up as different animals and do monologues.
Yeah.
And her one about earthworms is so beautiful. And she draws awareness to the fact that earthworms are intersex. They have they embody both sexes. And I just thought that was beautiful. So I literally identify as an earthworm.
I mean, yeah. And I have to say, nod to the slumber party with the child of the mattress store owners, by the way.
So real. I know. I really want to do a slumber party at my parents' store one day.
Oh my God. We have to make that happen.
We will. But I want to know, Nisha, as an earthworm, what are you excited to explore?
Oh gosh, so much. I'm really excited to explore what I don't know. And I think that's what I love about my conversations with you, is that they go in these directions where I'm like, where did this come from? I love it, And so I just want more of that. I want more of the unknown and the connections within the unknown. Like, I feel like in this conversations, you and I have made so many different connections between what we've said, and yeah, and that's how we explore big ideas playfully, right? Making these connections and exploring what we don't know through the energy of each other, through our interaction, through that impact, that emotional connection, the story connection. So yeah, I think I'm just really excited to explore the unknown. as earthworms who are having the best fucking slumber party of their life, you know? So yeah, that's what I'm here for.
Heck
Yeah.
yeah. Heck yeah.
What about you? I want to know.
I love what you're sharing. I have a similar response. I'm thinking about this woman I see on TikTok, Cheryl Porter. She's a vocal coach. And there's this one moment where she's coaching this child on how to sing. And they do this exercise where you like practice like throwing your voice like it's a ball. And something she tells this child is, when I'm asking you to sing or belt more intensely or hit a higher note, don't go up. Think going lower, because that is where your power is.
Ooh,
I know it's so
wow.
powerful that when you're trying to sing, there's this tendency to want to go up, but that actually takes you out of your core. So there's something about going deeper and tapping into power, personal power. And I guess I'm saying I want to be powerful, but I'm also saying that like, I'm just excited to go deep with you. Also to explore the unknown. Like through this conversation, there's been a couple moments where I'm like, whoa, we're knee deep in a can of worms right now. But I feel us continuing to regroup and move forward. And I think it just speaks to our gifts and our chemistry together that we can go to some really deep places, but I never feel unsafe. I never feel lost. I always feel like we can kind of come back together and remember that like this is a slumber party at the end of the day.
Yeah. We're here to be in our pajamas and to have pizza and talk about deep stuff.
Okay,
but
we're
in that
partying.
context. But we're partying. Exactly. Oh, I love that reflection. I think that's so incredibly beautiful to think about. Yeah, our chemistry and how that connects to what we want to explore together in this podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
So good. Well, I know that we have a question that we want to close out with. And moving forward, this is a question that people can expect to hear at the start of every podcast. And I feel honored for the inaugural asking of this question, to ask this question for the first time on this podcast. But Nisha, what are you composting?
I love this. I love this question. And I'm so excited to answer it for every episode. Right now, I am composting, and I'm very much at that nibble part of nibbling the soil, of composting, I guess, money trauma. You know, I actually recently got in a car accident and I'm physically fine, but, you know, I'm going to have to get a new car. And, you know, I wasn't wanting to spend this money right now, but it looks like I probably have to. Living in LA and all. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff with like having to spend this money that I thought I wouldn't have to spend right now. And I want to save more. And, you know, being on business on my own, having to literally make my living every month and not just expect that a paycheck's coming every month. You know, all of this stuff is coming together, and it has felt heavy in the last few days because this is, you know, when this has all happened for me. So, but I'm also like just really sitting with it and being like, okay, well, this is happening. You know, it happened and it's continuing to happen and affect my life, as well as probably the people, other people who are involved in the accident. And how will I compost this? How will I be with this situation? That also comes with feelings of like guilt and sadness and shock, while also thinking about this very real financial aspect, this world we live in where money is important, right? It rules a lot of our lives and are back to what you were saying, back to that safety and security. So yeah, I'm really composting that and seeing where it takes me and seeing what comes out the other end. We will see. But I'm really trying to do it more mindfully, maybe than in the past. Doing my best to, I guess, you know, come from a place of like abundance as opposed to scarcity. Really thinking about one thing I've mentioned before on my different social media platforms is how abundance isn't the opposite of scarcity necessarily. When I feel like I have enough, then abundance will come. And so trying to really think about that in the context of composting all this money stuff, that's kind of where I'm at. Yeah. I'd love to hear the same for you, Opulence. What are you composting?
Well, first, thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people can probably relate because we live in a world that's been pretty traumatized by money, quite frankly. When I think about what I'm composting, what comes to mind is fear, which is a forever friend for me. Like, I really want to honor my fear and just validate all the ways that fear has protected me. I recently held a boundary with someone, and I have just been feeling waves of fear in doing that. And I know that that's such a human experience, that sometimes holding boundaries can be really hard. And sometimes we have these emotional reactions, whether they're reasonable or not, that it's just our body remembering a time where maybe we weren't safe to hold boundaries. So I'm just holding that, honoring it, and hoping to turn it into something beautiful.
Yeah. And I love how you talked about it being your friend. Our feelings, even if they feel like absolutely the worst, really are our friends, right? They're there to be with us and protect us and support us. And I love thinking about it as a friend, just like two earthworms have come together for this podcast as
Yes.
friends. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm excited to start each episode with that question so we can literally ground ourselves in what we are composting in the beginning of each episode.
Same. Thank you to everyone listening, and thank you for doing this podcast with me, Nisha.
Thank you, Opulence. Super excited for you all to hear the next episode. So stay tuned, subscribe, do all those podcast things, and we will talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye. We really want to know what you think about Earthworm Slumber Party, so send us an email at earthwormslumberparty@gmail.com. You can also watch full episodes of this podcast on YouTube, so find us there.
We also have ways to work with us. Nisha is throwing free parties in Nisha Land. If you want to get down with Nisha, join her Notes from Nisha Land newsletter community to get the info.
And Opulence has a free gift for you, a beautiful and magical care plan creation guide that you can find on their Substack. And if you want to find us on Instagram, I'm at Healing Hype Girl, and Opulence is at Opulence Abundance.
We have a serious ask for you all, okay? Listen up. If you love Earthworm Slumber Party, if this podcast has changed your life and you want to see the show continue and to continue to hear our stories, then we need your support. You can go to ko-fi.com/Earthworm Slumber Party. Again, that's ko-fi.com/Earthworm Slumber Party. You can go there, learn a little about the show, and make a one-time or recurring donation. This donation will actually unlock a special episode. Your support makes this show possible, and all of this info is in our show notes.
Earthworm Slumber Party is hosted by Opulence Abundance and Nisha Modi, edited and scored by Adrien Garbar, and produced by Dalya Guerin.